the last one.
Hi, Ravi. When you say that atheists have no basis for morals, it seems that you're ignoring most of the existence of mankind, and that we can look at the world and see that that peace leads to prosperity in nations.
Say that again, that what?
That peace leads to prosperity in nations. We can look and see objectively that trust and safety in communities allow art and science and technology to prosper. You attack atheists like Hitler and the lonely rich, but it seems like a bit of a stretch to think that all atheists search for happiness in murder, power, and cutthroat business. So it seems like you're attacking the weak nihilist who looks at the universe, sees that there's no ultimate moral authority, and leaves it at that. But you're ignoring the strong nihilists who look at the universe, see no ultimate moral authority, and say, this is an opportunity for us to use our reason, to use our experiences to create morals, to create the society that can best further us, that can create the happiest society. And so 2 questions. One, why is it fair to ignore these strong nihilists? And 2, isn't it more noble to use our own reason and experiences to form morals than put blind faith in an old, outdated text?
It's a good question, and I respect you for answering it. The thing that I oftentimes say to people who raise these questions to us and do so very legitimately is we think about these things too. We don't say there's no such thing as goodness in an atheistic world. That's not what we are saying at all. In fact, many, an extreme humanist could be a very, very good person, morally good. That is the question is not whether an atheist can be a good person or not. The question is there is no rationally irreducible extension of reason to do that except pragmatically that you want to live in peace, but that is assuming that peace is a good thing. That's only a matter of survival. If you are my neighbor and I want to be at peace with you, but you are not happy with the way I keep my lawn or what I do with my dog when the dog comes out of there, you're going to be a very angry person and want me to comport with the ground rules that you want to leave me with. And we are ultimately then forced to ask the question, what of the person who believes, as some people do, believe me, I have met them, who believe that the West is the greatest curse in the world today, who want to eradicate it, and then the world will be a better place. What is the grounds for us reasoning with that kind of person? Oh yeah, we all need to get along. He says, yeah, but I get along better when you're not around. That's exactly what they do. I'll give you now your question is not a foolish question, it's a very real question. I know many people who don't believe in God who are very decent living people, very good people. Sometimes I find their way of living is much more attractive oftentimes than some of the most hateful letters I ever get are from people who claim to be very devout Christians. I mean, they could just slice me down at the knees. And the moment I read the first paragraph, I can say, this person is going to claim to be a very godly person by the time this letter is over. And I can get some very kind letters from people like you've raised your question in a very quiet way. But here's the question I raise for you. How do you adjudicate between 2 different moral frameworks that sit before you, each one of them believing that their goodness is superior to the other person's goodness? What happens today in the Middle East? You know what's happened in the Middle East for 5,000 years? One worldview lives with the philosophy and the logic of unforgiveness. It's a battle between 2 brothers, 2 half-brothers. The logic of unforgiveness. And so for 5,000 years now, blood's been let, blood's been spilt because there will never be forgiveness in there. Brother Andrew is a great man who's been to many parts of the world, a Palestinian young man who, by the way, in the same week I heard another, actually it was a previous visit, a young Palestinian person came up to me while I was in Jerusalem having some hummus and tabbouleh and all, enjoying conversation with him. And when I left, you know what he said to me? He said, I don't know if I'll see you again. I hope you do come. He said, well, I want to tell you something what our goal in life is. First, we will take care of Saturday, then we will take care of Sunday. Am I going to argue with him then? If I did, Sunday would be taken care of right then and there. So I had to leave. Brother Andrew was in a conversation, and a young Palestinian boy told me this story himself. He said, Brother Andrew was sitting across a sheikh's table in Jerusalem. And supposedly the story went that the Israelis had killed 4 Palestinians, and the Palestinians in revenge, under the sheikh's orders, went and killed 8 Israelis. So Brother Andrew leaned over and said, did you give that order? He said, yes. He said, can I ask you a question? Who made you the judge of everything in this world? He said, I'm not the judge. I'm only an instrument of God's justice. So this young Palestinian boy said, Brother Andrew looked at him and said, what then is the place for forgiveness? And he looked at Brother Andrew and said, that's only for those who deserve it. You know, if you deserve it, you're really not being forgiven, you've earned it. But you see the worldview coming through. The worldview is so deep-seated. If everybody had that natural inclination for peace and brotherhood and goodwill and so on, your question would be very pragmatically acceptable. But it's not the reality. The reality is the starting point is I and my worldview must be in control for millions of people today. For millions of people today. Yesterday I was in conversation with a man from a completely different worldview to mine. And my colleague, Matt, was with me in the car when he said this. He said, how do I respond to another person who's raising up his children with only one goal in life, to kill me? And I remembered being in Beirut, actually not in Beirut, in Sidon, where I met a man. And you know what he did every morning at sunrise? He took his 10-year-old boy, walked up, and he pointed to a distance, and he said, your goal in life is going to be to kill as many of those on the other side as on this. What do you say to him? I tell them that's not the answer. But the only reason I can tell them is because forgiveness is God's grace. The love of God places value on you. And if you really think about your questions seriously, you'll have to ask yourself this. How did we come to the conclusion, say the elimination of life in the womb, if your assumption from atheism is right, that we ought to live and live peaceably with each other? Life is too complex to take a simple principle like that and apply it for survival. It just has to assume what it means to be human and what kind of a moral ethic do we ultimately want living in this world. Your question is a good one. My answer to you is I've searched and searched and searched for years. I find no answer. Yes, can an atheist be a good person? But they're only living beyond what their own metaphysical assumptions actually are. And that's the way it ultimately boils down. Do you want to add? Let me just close with this. You've been very patient. I want to challenge you with this. For those of you who don't know Christ, I want you to give him some careful thought, serious thought. You don't have to take our word for it. Take the Bible, take the Gospel of John, and ask yourself the question, Jesus, if you're really who you claim to be, reveal yourself to me as if you are the Son of God. It was the prayer I prayed when I was 17. Francis Thompson was a drug addict. He never got into Oxford, though he applied 3 times, but he was a genius. He lived in 2 places, by the River Thames and at Charing Cross. Charing Cross, he would go and buy his opium. At night, he would sleep by the River Thames with his dirty raincoat wrapped around him. He would write letters to the editor, and the editor would say, a greater than a Milton is among us, but there's never a return address. He was living on the streets, Charing Cross and the River Thames. He wrote The Hound of Heaven. I fled him down the nights, I fled him down the days. I fled him down the arches of the years. I fled him down the labyrinthine ways of my mind, and in mist of tears, I hid from him. He was reading the book of Genesis, and he read the story of Jacob's ladder and God coming near. And Thompson penned these words, O world invisible, we view thee. O world intangible, we touch thee. O world unknowable, we know thee. Inapprehensible, we clutch thee. Does a fish soar to find the ocean? An eagle plunge to find the air? Do we ask of the stars in motion if they have rumor of thee there? Not where the wheeling systems darken, or our benumbed conceiving soars, the drift of pinions would we hearken, beats on our own clay-shuttered doors. The angels keep their ancient places, touch but a stone and start a wing. 'Tis ye, 'tis your estranged faces that amiss the many splendored thing. But when so sad thou canst not sadder, crying upon thy so-sore loss, shall shine the traffic of Jacob's ladder, pitched between heaven and Charing Cross. Yea, in the night, my soul, my daughter, cry clutching heaven by the hems, lo, Christ walking on the water, not of Gennesaret, but Thames. God is nearer to you than you realize. You don't have to take our word for it. You ask Christ if he is who he claims to be, to reveal himself to you. And I guarantee you this, if your prayer is sincere, when you find him and you know him, you will find the glue that puts all of life together, especially moral reasoning, especially meaning, hope, and the ultimate recovery of life beyond the grave. I want to thank you all at Princeton for being here and giving me a warm welcome. My compliments to the two fencing teams that just won the national championship. So hooray for them, we cheer them. He was a boxer at Oxford. I figured I was safe with fencing champs and a boxer here. We'd be all right. Somebody was watching out from my back. God bless you, and thank you, organizers, for having us.